been a long time we didn't meet, man. It's so good to see you, man. So
To see you, man. Alhamdulillah, things have been well. How have you been?
just on the grind, you know, the work bit and a lot of videos, and it's been interesting to see the watch, sort of the landscape, the collector's appetite, and what used to be sought after now is not sought after. You know, it's interesting to see these dynamics change. Like, believe it or not, back in the days, this would have been like the dog of them all. No one wanted to. It wasn't even there, you know. It was a steel sub when you talk. It was never the 126613 LB. But right now we're in a time where, if you want to phase it out, the collector that was after the steel sub now is looking at, okay, wait, a steel sub, it's aftermarket, something like what, $13,000-$14,000?
Roundabout.
Yeah, for 500 more, and you get something like that. You get days where this is absolutely boring. You get days where this is an old man's watch. But then you cannot deny how, you know, interesting the two-tone combination on the Submariner now. I actually like this more than the bluesy. You know, it's a little bit more subtle. What do you think?
I tend to agree. I would tend to agree with you. I think it's a little bit more, less flashy, if you like.
I know, right?
Yeah.
And even though it's gold.
Yeah, even though it's gold, it's a little bit more less flashy than the bluesy. Elegant watch, a daily beater.
Yeah.
I think even with the little bit of gold that it's covered in, you could rock this every day.
Yeah, absolutely.
Going to work or basically doing work from home. Times have changed.
Yeah.
You've seen people going from actual mechanical tool watches all the way to the electronic bits with Apple Watches.
Yeah, don't play around with the Apple Watch. That's like, to me, that's a health device. That's there.
Those are for millennials.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true.
But yeah, the hardcore watch enthusiasts, if you
Yeah.
like, always goes back to these tool watches. And this is what it was, right? This is what it was back in the days. And I think it's always going to be the same.
Yeah.
You know, I regardless of the fluctuations in the market, tool watch is a tool watch.
Yeah, and they don't. And speaking of the market as well, Khaled, they don't. These specifically, these two-tone subs, they don't go extremely high up or extremely low. It's always marginal. It's always a little bit, you know. It's always just a hair over retail or a hair under retail, which is the situation exactly. Honestly, if I were to recommend, you know, the one that is fun, you play around with, you rock it, shorts, jeans, and what's not, or if you have like a suit and you go into work or whatever, I think this is definitely one of those keepers, man. And I think the tone of the black on two-tone is a preference over the blue because it's not in your face, you know. It's a bit subtle. It's flashy when you want it to be, and it's just, you know, a luxury toolish watch.
Absolutely.
You also want it.
I wouldn't be able to put it better. Luxury toolish watch, as you rightly said. You would tend to be able to wear it more.
Yeah.
You know, in more occasions than the bluesy.
I'll ping the dollar for it and this on the screen. That the retail is about 66,200 dirhams.
That's in dirhams, yes.
Okay. Aftermarket, you'd be doing a 59, 58 on it. And in the peak time, just under 70. So it's not really bad. It's an option if you want it, and it's available. If you want to think about what's happening today in the aftermarket, which we need to kind of get your perspective on. I think this is a good pick. People say, yeah, the market is down. Dealers tell you the market is up. They obviously want to push inventory. There is also the fact that, yeah, I've got 50, 30 people working for me. So that's why I'm credible. But then there is a lot of also dodgy things. There is dial change situation happening with a lot of these Oyster Perpetuals as well. What's going on? I mean, give me the overarching picture.
I would not say only with Oyster Perpetuals. I would say it's the whole 9 yards. I mean, you can see it in all of the other watches also.
Yeah.
So you really need to be very careful who you're buying these watches from.
Yeah.
If we touch upon those issues that we are facing or we can see today in the market, one very important aspect there is that white tag, which puts the exact model number in front. So let's say if you've got an Oyster Perpetual, a 124300, then you've got a number after it, 001, 002, 003, 004, 007. Depending on that, you would be able to tell what dial this watch came in. It's going to merit a higher premium if the watch has that white tag.
Yeah.
Because now...
Really?
Yes, actually, absolutely. So if you go and try to buy something from the market today, you will see that there are ones without the white tag, and then there are ones with the white tag, and whoever has that white tag is asking for more because he can provide you a watch and provide you the evidence of this watch having that exact tag. But that does not mean to say that these tags cannot be bought aftermarket.
Really?
Of course.
Okay.
Some people may
It's a
yeah,
fringe
I mean, so
business
yeah,
altogether.
that again, you come back to that same problem.
Yeah.
But then you'd wonder, why would somebody be selling a white tag? Maybe you get fakes as well.
Really?
So
Sure.
it's possible. Everything is possible, and today, day and age, and what we see. And as I said, it's not only about specific brands.
Yeah.
We are also talking about the higher luxury brands,
Yeah.
which today are having some Frankenstein elements, if you like. Let's go a little bit to cars. Right?
Yeah.
So sometimes when you want to service a car or change parts, there are two things that you could do. You could actually get the genuine parts, or you could get some parts from the market, which are cheaper.
Yeah.
Now, it doesn't mean that these parts they're not fake, maybe they're used, maybe they're spare parts from other cars.
Just not in claim condition.
Just not exactly the condition that the actual watch would be in. Certain parts are now also being bought from the market and are being
Added to somewhere else.
added to somewhere else. And those watches do exist today in the market. That's a big problem, because when you buy a watch, you want to make sure that all of the parts, everything in this watch actually belongs to this watch.
And this is where this two-tone sub becomes interesting, because what are you going to change there? You know, you can't put a blue dial on a Cerachrome black bezel. It's not going to happen, right? Unless you change the bezel too, which is actually good for me because that's even more in demand, right? But when you look at the dated, when you look at the OPs, right? You get a silver dial, you get a blue dial, you switch it up with a red one discontinued or a Tiffany or whatever.
That's a big difference.
They are doing that. It's acceptable Frankenstein business factored in as a revenue stream, because from a dealer's perspective, especially in a market like today, right? I would go to you, you have 20 employees. I look at an OP that you've got. How am I going to know that this is truly a red dial 41 case size without this white tag, for example? Or it could come with a white tag as you described, but it could be I'm not going to know. I'm not going to look into these details. I just think of it as a piece of plastic, right? So it really is sad, you know, like you've done years in this business. You've built up a team. You've built up a business. Why are you being a little bit greedy?
Not a little bit.
It's a lot greedy, yeah.
I believe that it seems like, because the number of fakes that are coming up, the number that I hear
fake is a
my
drastic
friends. Yes, but again, some of these dials are actually fake.
As in the dial itself is fake.
Yes, so there are so many that have been uncovered in the past year, which makes it very alarming. What happened with the Omega instance, where the watch was sold for, I think,
in the auction,
on the auction house,
and it was questionable,
and then it was questionable. But the easiest way and the best way is when you are buying anything pre-owned and not directly from the authorized dealer, get it checked regardless of the tag, regardless of what you feel and who you're buying it from. Dealers have got, even the pre-owned dealers have got a responsibility. They themselves need to make sure that what they're selling to their end users is actually authentic, accurate, and they have checked it themselves. A lot of people come and say, oh, we've checked it. And they've not actually done it. But they say, oh, we've checked it. Oh, well, he's buying something from a guy for the last 5 years, 7 years. Oh, I trust this person. He comes in, he gives me something, it's going to be genuine. I don't need to check it. No, you do need to check it.
Right.
Because maybe he's been scammed.
You need to be careful. You need to check. If you know what you're buying, perfect. If you don't know what you're buying, get it authenticated. That's one side of it. But then in the cycle of, you know, being a collector, collecting, taste change, taste are cyclical. Sometimes you get into, you know, what's there for vintage. And I know you brought two interesting pieces, actually. Kind of harder to check.
Yes, that's what I was actually referring to. So vintage pieces are way more harder, especially when it comes to Rolex. Rolex does not have archives. Patek has, AP has, Vacheron can provide you archives. Rolex does not hold an actual archive of the older watches. So especially when you get like special pieces with logos on them, you really need people to identify this period that this watch has come out in, and then look at the dials and compare them to what they've actually seen in the past. What I like to do is when I come across something very, very rare, I go to an expert. I myself have some experience with vintage pieces, but I still go to get a second opinion and sit with the person that I trust. We compare those watches to what he has as well and what I have in the past. On that basis, serial numbers have to be in a similar range. The dial variation has to be very similar. Small differences with a dot or a scratch or something. Every dial has, or every watch has its own life. People have treated it differently. So it may have small differences.
So what are we looking at, Khalid? What is that?
This is an Oyster perpetual date with the UE logo. This is a special one because you don't see a lot of this. You see a few of them with the armed forces written on it. But this one actually is one of the rare ones which says police and not the armed forces. From the late 80s, late 70s to mid 80s, late 80s. Again, serial number just gives you a range, but it's difficult for you to be able to tell which year exactly it is from. You could approximately, but not accurately if you don't have the papers and documentation for that. However, this specific variation is a little bit rare because you do not tend to see this writing that you see here, which says al-shurta or shurta, which is basically means police. You see these variations in the armed forces actually written on the dial, but not the police that often. So this is very rare. Just wanted to share it with you for you to see. And
that's a really beautiful watch, and I can tell you it's in pristine condition. Had you asked me by default, it's 34, is it a good men's size? I'd say no.
Back in the days it was.
It looks perfect on this. Had this been even a little bit bigger, it would have been plainer.
These ones in particular were given to servicemen. Some were given as gifts.
So the big boss came and said, I'm going to buy 20. I'm going to give them to 20 selected members.
He could say, it could be 20, it could be 50, it could be 100, it could be 150, it could be 200. But based on my experience, I've not seen many with the police written on them.
I couldn't help but to notice the interesting dial on this Daytona. So maybe tell us a little bit about that.
This is the Rolex Daytona 16520 Patrizzi dial. I would say the controversial dial. There are many variations. Again, one of the watches which has gotten a lot of criticism over the years, where you come back and say the oxidization needs to be on certain years and not on the other years, and then you come up and you see different years having the oxidization and not being a tritium dial, even being a luminova dial. There is so many people talking about this watch. It is always going to be controversial. It's always going to be like that. But I can tell you, this is a full set that I have. It's the original watch that came with this set. So at the end of the day, it's been polished, but the condition is good. One of the most watches in the market today that tend to be meddled with, I would say. Because once you get the oxidization on the subdials, that's what merits the premium on this piece. Apart from the oxidization as well, obviously you tend to look at the serials which had Patrizzi initially. So you've got serial W, serial T, S, and then if you go above, some of them also have oxidization, and when you go under, some of them also have oxidization. So I have seen P serials, which was actually the last Daytona 16520 serial, which came around 2000, 2001. I've seen dials that have a Patrizzi shade. Now that's all the way up to 2001. That's around about the time when Rolex bought most of the other companies that they were outsourcing or bringing in the materials from. So and then after that, so a lot of people call it the white Patrizzi. It's not the white Patrizzi, just to make it very clear. It's called Panna dials, which is 116520. You find them majorly in 3 serials. P serial, Y serial, K serial, and some of them in F serial. The F serials are questionable, same way that people would question A and P and the rest of the pieces that came after 1995, 1996. Rolex is a brand that is one of the most mysterious brands that you can see in the world. Due to all of these things that happened over the years, they actually came up, they surprised us with the new Sprite.
Yeah.
There was a very big question mark on them doing something completely different after years, although they have made the straw and left-handed pieces back in the days. But when they came up with something new like this, it shocked the world. And you've done a review on it as well.
Yeah.
So they tend to come up with these things and shock the watch world quite often. So you can expect anything from these neo vintage pieces.
It can go either way. If they discontinue the GMT lefty, as the general public calls it now, then yes, it will go in the books. However, if Rolex decides to give its fair share to its siblings, the Pepsi, the Batman, then I think that's just going to demolish the hype about it, right?
I actually thought that there's going to be a 1-year production, and I was wrong.
Yeah, I thought so too.
I will have to admit.
I doubled up on them.
I'll be the first to admit that.
I went and picked a few from the aftermarket thinking it was going to get discontinued. And no, they were still there. So I look at this beautiful Patrizzi Daytona. I look at this Oyster Perpetual. If you could just summarize, what are some of the things to the one that does not know to keep in mind for checking when getting into vintage?
Okay, I'll break it down into 3 things.
Okay.
Simple. Number 1 being the dial.
Okay.
The money is in the dial. The dial has to be original. And you need to check every single thing in that dial, all the way up from the writings to the indexes, to the subdials, to the actual variations, to how it's aged. You know, to a collector, they want to make sure that everything is period correct. But when everything is period correct, that merits a higher premium.
Sure.
You need to understand that. The other thing is, after the dial comes obviously the case.
Yeah.
So the case number, the serial numbers on those case need to match with this time where this dial was actually produced.
Because it's always a range, it's never exact.
Absolutely.
You know, this dial, this case was made between X and X.
So you may get a Mark V dial, and then your case is from a period of Mark I. There is something not right here. The dial has been replaced. So that gives you the first indication. I'll give you another example. You've got 6263 dial, bezel, everything that matches the year. But you look at the back case, and once you open the watch from behind, the back case has 6265 written on it. Still okay, but at the end of the day, it's not a 6263's back case. It was replaced, maybe it had come like that, but that small thing may make a difference to certain collectors. Doesn't make a difference to me.
Or maybe the end of the era of 6263s.
Absolutely.
And that was actually done by Rolex.
Absolutely.
Or the likelihood of it is that it was replaced by someone outside. It was just a similar case size, so you know, it was just mounted on it regardless of the engraving inside.
And then comes the rest of the stuff, where the bracelet and the crown and the crown guards and stuff like that, if it's a GMT or if it's a Daytona. Sometimes it's not period correct, but it's original of Rolex, which makes sense. Parts even in the movement may be changed, but Rolex, it's a vintage watch. It's 40 years old, it's 35 years old. Normal for these things to change, but you would have a problem if it's a modern watch. That's where we have the issue, which we were talking about initially.
And speaking of authentication, do check out Watch Society website, of course, for the merch, for all the interesting stuff. But we do have a little JV coming up that's to do with a really well-experienced, well-versed watch authenticator. So if you've got a vintage piece or even a modern piece and you want to get it checked, this is something that you need to look at. This is a service coming up on Watch Society website. I wanted to segue quickly and highlight that because I think this is of value, right? So it's not us saying buy a watch from us, but I'm saying if you have something vintage, if there's something that's been keeping you up at night after your purchase, maybe a day or a year, and now you want to check it, this is going to be available. And these guys are ex-Rolex, ex-ADs, ex-XX, so they've looked at thousands of these watches when they were actually released, So something worth noting. All right, let's conclude on who's vintage for. You would have asked me when I started Watch Society, when I first met you, about a vintage watch, and I would have said no to the no to the no's. Now, I've been talking to you about helping me out with a birth year GMT, and this is something maybe we'll talk about in the next video. And it's just an emotional reference. As I said, you know, you go through an evolution of learning, etc. You dabble with different things, and then you come to a point where you say, now I want to make this piece really sentimental to me. You know, the story that my kids would carry is that, oh, you know, this carries my father's birth year. And a GMT because that was my era, looking at the Pepsi, the blue and red and what's not. But what is that from your perspective? Why would someone get into vintage?
That reminded I think it's worth saying why you want a Pepsi.
I mean, my father owned one, of course.
Right.
You know, it was the first watch that I didn't even know what it was. I just looked at the red and the blue.
Yeah.
I just thought it's a watch. You know, I didn't feel anything toward it. But then later in time, because my dad was a physician and he traveled a lot to Geneva to conferences and what's not back in the days, and he always had this watch on, right? And it just kind of, it was subliminally suggested to me, the blue and red is what I've later come to find out is a GMT. But that's it, not the Sprite or the Batman, or it was the blue and red, right? So I wanted to tie that memory with a birth year GMT.
And I would tend to tell you that you have made the right decision.
Yeah, of course.
Actually, the GMTs are one of my favorites.
Yeah.
They are extremely difficult to find, and more difficult to find in original condition, period correct. Period correct is the right word, because during those times a lot of these things were changing. So you were asking me something very funny. I mean, not funny. It was a genuine question, and if you recall, I started smiling when you asked me that. And you're like, so the first GMT, how much did it sell for back in the days? And my answer to you was $150, $200, $300. We're talking about 6542, the first ever GMT to actually be produced.
Now look at them
for Pan Am, of course. You know the story. Not to bore you with that.
Worth a fortune.
But today it's quite a bit of a premium over the original price.
And it's well deserved, right? This is I would do that as opposed to a premium on a Daytona that they just called out maybe 4 months ago.
At the end of the day, we come back to what you like, what you would like to wear, what appeals to you aesthetically, and what is actually a meaningful watch for you to be able to own.
100%.
So at the end of the day, it comes back to your individual liking more than what others say and perceive.
Well said, Khalid. Always good to see you. Don't forget to check out horology_master on Instagram.
Master_horology.
Don't forget to check out master_horology. Today we talked about this two-tone, beautiful Submariner, which I think is a good pick over to steal if you got access to it. We also talked about this very beautiful Zenith Patrizzi dial Daytona. Very, very nice. The way it aged is beautiful. And of course, we saved the best for the last. Did I say that right? We saved the best for the last?
Yes.
It sounded wrong. Which is an Oyster Perpetual date with the UAE emblem. That's not the UAE emblem, is it?
That's the UAE logo.
That's the UAE logo. And if you look closely, I'll try to get it to focus. It actually says Shurta, which is police in Arabic. You'll be seeing a lot more coming your way from me and Khalid. Khalid, good to see you once again. Thank you so much, man. This was awesome. Thank you.
Pleasure's mine.